mind, I'll just, quit. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen over here. And I wanted to first share with you of what inspired me for this, session. So this is a post that I put out um, on LinkedIn, and I started to get comments from people who said, "Hey, mind if I use this list and modify it for my purposes?" And Michael Bolton saying, "Excellent work." Kanika, who heads for Applitool, saying, "Brilliant post." So many people, saying these things, plus uh, they sharing it, and there's more than 20,000 people who viewed it, and a lot of people sharing it, saying, "Hey, this is good. This is good. I like this approach. I like this approach." So I thought, if so many people like this approach, if so many people who are sharing it are saying that, this is what something that they want to use, I was trying to think about, hey, I have my fellow Moolyans who can make some good use of this as well. And so I wanted to do a small, testing demonstration of how of how I answer these questions that many different stakeholders have. But before that, I just want to share with you that uh, I wrote this book and I published this book, which it's been a month plus now, and I had used that book as an opportunity to test out some ideas that I had. And based on the feedback and everything that I've got from people who have bought the book, or and people who have read the book, has been very, very positive. um, and there's plenty of messages that have come about it, and I think some of them I've shared on LinkedIn, and some of them I put it on my WhatsApp status, in case if you've actually seen it. So there's plenty of good messages that keep coming about the book, and primarily what seemed to be resonating with all of them is that uh, is the idea that as testers, we are answering questions of stakeholders. So if you imagine, if you see what is the tangible output that people are looking at from testers, uh, uh, we are like investigative journalists. We are doing an investigation. So this is not a typical journalism. This is not shouting on the 9 o'clock show and saying, "Please only listen to me." This is investigative journalism. This is like the best example that can be given is, of course, Sherlock Holmes, who is, of course, an investigator. And what Sherlock Holmes would do is that Sherlock Holmes would not conclude in very easily, who would investigate, who would observe things, who would conjecture, who would question, who would do all of these things, and finally provide a recommendation to the judges, to the people who are going to give the judgment of who is the culprit. That's what Sherlock Holmes did, right? So it has captivated the whole world. And the beauty of the way Sherlock Holmes did it is that there was little judgment to be given. The nobody needed to argue who is the real culprit, right? So that's what similar is what testers do, is they find information. So there, Sherlock Holmes find who's the criminal. Here we don't find criminals, we find information that's hiding, information that is non-obvious, and then we present it to the stakeholders to make decisions. So whether you're doing functional exploratory testing by hands, by brains, or you're writing scripts, you're doing automation, you must understand that the true value of your work is only when it answers questions of stakeholders, right? Now I want to tell you um, how we strike deals with a lot of startups, right? So one of the things that we say during our pitch is this, that um, well, you are about to launch something, right? So this was the pitch to Flipkart, let's say, when we were testing the first app that they released, which was the flight app, right? And why did they choose us? So our pitch was this: you are releasing this app for the first time. You have a lot of known unknowns and you have a lot of unknown unknowns. So what we would do as testers is to find questions, is to find answers to the questions that you have, and find information for which the questions you should have had, but you didn't ask for that. And this really moves people to say that this is the testing team that we want to choose working with. So essentially, if you look at uh, how we have been able to influence the stakeholders, we have been able to influence stakeholders by telling them the questions that they have and who would give the answers, right? So for instance, let me give you an example. You all know about crowdsourced testing, right? So the crowdsourced testing has been there for the last decade. One of the biggest challenges in crowdsourced testing is everybody will be finding similar bugs and reporting it as a bug that's very unique. Now the noise levels can be too high, but ultimately, what do stakeholders want? They don't want the noise, they want an answer. Does my app install on 100 devices? So I just want to bring up my notes, and I want to share with you this. um, okay. So so um, uh, so let's say someone is launching an app for the first time, right? What kind of questions will they have? What kind of questions will they have when somebody is launching an app for the first time? So they'll have questions of, does this app install across my target set of customers, right? Now this is where context driven testing comes into picture. So what we would do there is we would be asking questions, further questions. So this is a question that the stakeholder has. Now in order to address this question for them, we need to ask them sub questions like, who is your targeted audience? All right. And now let's say they say, okay, teens. Okay, teenagers are my targeted audience. So then we need to do it. What kind of phones do teenagers use, right? And then we find this, and then let's say we say it's Samsung J7. I'm just giving some examples. I don't know, maybe there is a, I don't even know if there is a Samsung J7 right now. Okay, Samsung J7, and they say LG, I don't know, 450, just making it up. Motorola One, this is like the top used phones. And then when we find problems, when we find information, we would say, hey, this issue affects 32% of your user base. So I would, let's say, be just finding just one bug. But the way I would present this information is to say, hey, this issue affects 32% of your user base, and hence your release readiness might be compromised, right? So it's beautiful, right? Um, so this is the question that the stakeholder has. Now this stakeholder could be the product owner, could be the app owner, could be the CEO if it's an early stage company, and or it could be the VP engineering, right? So there'll be multiple stakeholders or different stakeholders at different stage of the company. And that's also another important thing that the testers need to be very careful about. As the organization is growing, the stakeholders are changing, their questions are changing, so we need to continuously look at who is asking what questions and feed them only that relevant information. I used to wonder why CEOs have very little attention span. Okay. And I used to have this question for a very long period. in the last couple of years is where I have understood the answer for it. So people tell a huge story, and then they come to the last sentence. And usually the last sentence is what is the bottom line of the whole story. For instance, you can say, oh, this happened, and this happened, she said that, he said this, and this said, and then the final sentence will be, okay, because of all of these reasons, to change uh, I want to change from this team to another team. So now, the C level folks and the V level folks have very little attention span. So we need to be able to filter out this information and share with them only that relevant information. And that's the reason why, as the stakeholders change, the questions change, the answers change, the way you present the answers also change. So let's go back to this one, right? So one is, we asked about who's your target audience. What kind of other questions? Now I want to just go into this chat. Let me just, how do I do that? How do I see the chat? Yeah, okay, now I'm seeing the chat, right? So in the chat you can message and Jen, give me a couple of suggestions of what kind of questions will stakeholders have when they are launching the app for the first time. Okay, go ahead and type. Is anybody typing? Okay, am I still there? Okay, Deepa, you can just come in and say, yes, Pradeep, we can listen to you. Oh, you can also raise your hand. Okay, so people, I'm asking you a question to come in the chat and share a question that if you were launching an app for the first time, what questions will you have? Go and type those questions. So if you're from phone, it might be difficult for you to type, but yeah, okay. How secure is my app? Darshan says, how secure is my app? Okay, that's good. That's good. Now we are starting to get some responses right here. So one is, who's your okay, who does this app install across my target set of customer phones? Okay, I'm refining my own question there. And then somebody says, how secure my app is? Okay, that's a good question. And then Srinivas says, does it work across all countries? Yes, work across all countries. Yeah, so typically, Srinivas, when people are launching the app for the first time, unless they are Google, right, they won't be distributing it across the whole world. They would first be releasing it in one region and then expanding to other region. I've seen even Google do this. Google has this app called Neighborly, which they did not launch in all places in India. They launched it by one city to one city to one city to one city. Okay, great. So I think DS is asking a question of how will people, how will people users, discover my app? Okay, that's a good question. How will users discover my app? So that's a good question that is very relevant to the marketing teams, and I tell you how it, or does the app fulfill the requirement and is user friendly? Okay, so when we say requirements, right, there's so many requirements, and everybody knows all of the requirements cannot be fulfilled. But I'm just going to rephrase your questions to Kanya. I'm going to ask a question that, will the users recognize uh, the value of this app? Right? Will the users recognize the value of this app? So there are many similar copycats of WhatsApp, but none of us are using it unless it has a very special value. And if they're releasing it to compete against, let's say, a WhatsApp, and we download, and we all have very limited attention span as well these days. So essentially, what people are looking at is, when they're releasing an app for the first time, do people see the value of using this app against all other apps, right? So people have a lot of choices of apps these days. So Kavita Rao is asking, how different should my app be with a competitor app? Okay, precisely. um, you know how do we fare as compared to a competitor X, right? Okay, so that's a good question. Okay, what else? Have we stopped getting questions? Okay, Udipta asked, will this app work on all devices? Yes, that's the first thing that we talk about. Will the end user be able to use this? From Shashank Jain? Yes. Okay, so that's a similar question to what um, we have written about the value part of it. Okay, that's it. Any other questions that you can think about? Anything else that you can think about? Okay, am I confident that my app doesn't crash during the first time user experience? Okay, precisely. So the first time user experience is very, very essential. First time user experience. And I'll show you why the first time user experience is very, very essential. Okay, be it a mobile app or be it any app, right? So I'm just gonna, okay, so take this to you, right? So I'm just going to show you the uninstall rates of the apps, right? So so if you look at the statistics aspect of it, right? In terms of retention, where yeah, the retention rate, they call it the retention rate. The majority of the apps, so the majority of the apps, they lose a lot of users. So if you look at it, there's so many visitors out here. From these visitors, there are about 36,000 installers, and from 36,000 on day one, they've lost close to about 13,000 users, and every day they are losing about 20,000 users and that. And for 30 days, if they've been able to retain 11,000 users, it's a very, very successful app. Very successful app. Okay, because most of the apps they lose a ton load of users in the first few seconds. So so again, if you look at what's it, this graph, right? So if you look at the retention rates here, from it drops significantly, and that's what everybody has been reporting, that retaining users, okay, is one of the very, very complex tasks in the world. So mobile app uninstall rate after 30 days is about 28% according to some people. So the first time user experience is something that is a very, very important aspect. So I just want to bring up my notes again. So essentially what we are looking at is that um, is about the first time user experience, and then the whole lot of things happens in the first time user experience. So that's a good question. And how many major and minor bugs and how many users are affected? Yeah, I mean, so bugs are always going to be there. So this is essentially what testers need to understand. Because we find bugs, we get super excited about bugs, right? But essentially, I don't care how many major bugs and minor bugs are there, but I care about what is the impact of it. What is the impact? So for example, there may be one bug, but that bug, right? But that bug could be driving away 50% of the users, right? So if there are 100 major bugs which are only contributing to 1%, but there is one bug which is 50%, I would want to fix that 50% contributing bug rather than fix everything else. So it is essential for us as testers is to understand how do we know what is the impact, right? How do we know what is the impact? So essentially, if you look at it, there are some questions that are actually coming up, right? So we can say, so does this app install across my target set of user phones? Okay, how secure is my app? Work across all countries. So I'm just going to change this to, how will users discover my app? Will be there? Will the users recognize the value of this app? How are we doing the first time user experience? There may be, and then I'm going to just delete all of the rest of the stuff. So one way is this, right? When we are brainstorming, you get a lot of ideas, okay? And once the brainstorming is done, you'll have to clean up your ideas. So essentially what I've done is I've taken I've actually taken in all of these questions, and then I'm trying to come up with like three most important questions that the testers need to answer. So what will it be? I would actually prioritize this one, the first time user experience. And then I would say the second one is about this, where I would say this is the second one. And then how will users discover my app? Yeah, this is for, so this essentially, this is for the marketing team. So what I'll do is I'll park this idea, okay, separately. And I'll say this is a question that the marketing team has. Okay, however, there is a small overlap between marketing and testing, and I'll talk about that part of it. How how do we fare as compared to a competitor? So that's the third one. Now, what's how secure, how secure is my app? When you don't have a large number of users, uh, you know, the security aspect people don't usually focus on. Now, you and I think as testers, it is very critical. It's very important. But I have seen plenty of people, including large companies that we are working with, they don't take security at the start seriously. Unless some shit happens, they don't take it seriously. This is the reality of the world. Whether you accept the reality, you reject the reality, this is how the world is going to be. But unless there is a context. If it is a trading application, if it is an application launched by a company where the data that is being fed inside is very sensitive, then they certainly do care for it. But most of the b2c apps that I've been a part of since their early journey did not have a strong focus towards the security. So essentially what I will do is I will put this in a lower priority. Does this app install across my target set of? Yes. So this is an equal priority to three. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to further cut down the list, to say that okay, these are the top three for me, and the first time user experience. And I'll also weed out this one because the first time user experience also comprises of install and other stuff. So so essentially what we are doing right now is we are going to have just three questions, three simple questions. Okay, three simple things that the product owners, the app owners are interested at. The first time user experience, will the users recognize the value of this app? How do we fare as a competitor to X? Because there is ton load of competition about everything, anything that anybody releases. For example, uh, let's say Hotstar and Netflix and Amazon Prime all are competing against each other with people with limited budget. And now of course we are forced to buy all of them. And then suddenly they release this movie. What was that? Um, the Uri movie. So I'm subscribed to Netflix. I'm subscribed to Amazon Prime. I'm subscribed to Hotstar, and the Uri movie got released in Z5, and I had to purchase at least 1 month plan to watch that movie. And so people, that USP is very essential. If if uh, if Z5 did not release Uri in there, I would have never bought a Z5 subscription. But today, once in a while, they keep releasing movies that I want to watch, and hence they force me, to do it. So all of these companies are competing to retain their USP. Their USP is the core. So now that we understand that these three are the top questions that people have now. Yes, as a tester, your mind will come up with ton load of questions. Every question will look very important, but but the but here is what you have to do. You'll have to say, like, what are the top three questions in this? Now you can pick any of the top three that you think is top three, and then now you channelize your testing to find out information matching to this. So for example, for the first time user experience, okay, we can say this, that it is about it's about installation. It's about what are the things that will come up as a part of the first time user experience. Okay, come on, type again. So you will have, yes, okay, so you'll have installation, you will have the permissions, If it's an app, you'll have the permissions, you'll have the registration, and then you will have the the animation, the UX part of it, and then you will have okay, what else you'll have, and then about the value. Yeah, the terms and conditions. Yeah, DS is one of the so so one of the personas you should have in your mind when you're actually testing is to have DS in mind, who will certainly read the terms and conditions and can point out flaws in terms and conditions. Uh, so we'll come to the personas part of it, right? Okay, so we are looking at this installation, permissions, registration, the UX, and the core value. Let's say core value, and I'll give an example of core value. Let's say if you're installing cred, and the installation is smooth, it doesn't crash during the first time it launched. So I would say installation and launch. Installation is just never an installation, and then you have the permissions part of it, that you'll have to give permissions to a whole lot of stuff. And here's the tricky part, right? If the app is really good but it asks for a lot of permissions, then a lot of people drop out. So you have to be very careful of when to ask those permissions. So if you look at what cred did, so what did cred do is cred did not ask directly Gmail access. Okay, so cred asked for SMS access, and from there they try to derive about what credit card bills are due, and then they said, hey, but if you were to give us Gmail access, we will be proactive, right? So that's the very tactical way they move things. So the permission and the registration, it has to be very smooth. People people don't again have the attention span, right? So people, if you're asked to type your password, retype your password, retype your password, and then you say what's a select this, and then there is 7-step registration. Nobody wants to do the 7-step registration. So all of this covers under the first time user experience part of it. And now when you give a report of this, here is how you can structure out your report, okay, to answer this question of where are we on the first time user experience of our app. You can say that, hey, we tested this app for first time user experience across the target devices, which are Samsung, which incorporates 40% of the users, Motorola, which incorporates 30% of the users, and then LG, which incorporates 20% of the users. And now you can say 100 install and launch tests were done, out of which 96% of the install and launch was a success, right? And then there was a 4% failure. So now this is a beautiful, crisp information, for the stakeholder asking for the first time user experience part of it, right? And so when you can simplify this question, when you can come up with just the top 3 questions based on the context, you will be then structuring of what are the core things, what are the simple core things that is essential to answer this question. Your test report automatically gets structured, is becoming very simple. And now in the 4% failure is where you would say, okay, look at the Jira ticket 2321 or 2323, whatever, it looks like a train number for me. So you can say, so this is the Jira ticket, and then we've reported it. And there also what most of the testers do is they report symptoms as a problem. And that's where I'm going to remind you of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes doesn't jump and just say, okay, I saw this guy come out of the room after the person was murdered, so, and hence this person is the murderer, right? So it's not like that. It is that you'll need to investigate, you'll need to think about scenarios in which it could happen, and instead of reporting 3 bugs, you can just report 1 bug, unless they are different bugs, where you say, hey, yeah, this is the coronavirus I found out, and these are the 6 symptoms. So you can either report saying, okay, here is a fever, here is a sore throat, here is a cough, here is a dry cough, here is a sneezing, here is whatever, right? So instead of reporting all of that stuff, you can do an investigation, you can do a deeper test and say, oh, this app has the corona bug, right? So that way, you would not be pinpointing at symptoms of the issues, but you would be pinpointing at what the real core issue is. And now that's one. And then comes, so once you have cracked this puzzle, right? I'm not going very deep on this, so please don't think that this is what ultimately it is, to just come up with these numbers and say, okay, 96% is a success. Now look at it. I'm not even talking about pass and fail. For stakeholders who want answers, they don't want test cases, they want answers to questions. I can write 1,000 test cases that pass. Even if you give me the most buggiest of the app, I will write 1,000 test cases that pass, right? Even if you give me the so-called bug-free software, I can come up with test cases which end up in failure. So it's essentially, the stakeholders are not looking at pass fail. They're looking at, are we finding answers to questions that matter before we go live, and what is the risk? Now if you look at this part of it, right, so what we are saying is there is a 4% failure, right? And the 4% failure will impact, like, for example, if 100 people install and launch, for 4 people it may crash during the first time user experience. Now most of the testers that I've worked with are like perfectionists. They want, like, no, this is wrong, this is not how it's supposed to be. No, not true. We must understand that businesses are taking risk. If it works for 96 people, they don't want to delay the release because for 4 people it gets affected, right? So what's a think about it, of like what's happening in the world. The world today knows that there are going to be some people who is going to be infected and affected and are actually moving around, but this lockdown is essentially to help all of us, to protect the 96% of the people, and the 4% are going to be affected any which way. So essentially, that's how governments, businesses, stakeholders make decisions, where they say that if the majority is actually satisfied, let's go with that. So now, for example, if I'm just giving an example of 96, I've seen stakeholders, app owners, product owners, CEOs make calls even if it's a 70% or a 60%, because they think that making that decision is more important than holding it back and trying to fix this, right? Okay, so that's one example that I gave. Then we talk about the permissions part of it, right? So this, what we could do now, this is where your intelligence as a tester comes into picture. How will you find out the impact of permissions on the app installation and success of the app installation and the first time user experience? So that's where we will have to design a beta test. So we'll say we will pick up 100 teenagers, and we will ask them to install, and we will see how many people stop at what permission that they stop at, right? So that's like a beta test, because you can't sit inside and do that test, because for you as a tester, you will want to give all the permissions and move ahead, but that's not what users will do. Users, how many times you have actually not given permissions to app, right? So there is plenty of reasons for that, right? So if right away an app is saying, okay, we will now have access to all your passwords, will you give access? No, you will certainly not give access. But you've given access to such apps if it comes from Google, if it comes from a credible source like an Apple and things like that, right? So you won't give such access to everybody. So if your app is asking for, let's say, Wi-Fi, status permissions, and the device what's a state permissions and things like that. And if somebody is a tech tech aware person, they will say, oh, why should I give a Wi-Fi access to this right now when I don't even know what the value of the app is, right? So essentially we'll have to design a beta test and then say 80 people out of 100 stopped at Wi-Fi permissions, right? Now, by if you just find this information, you would have contributed far more than finding any crash, any bug, because you saved them, you saved this company from not marketing it extensively, because they're going to only get 20 users where they were supposed to get 80 users, right? So they will say, okay, now the stakeholder can make a decision and say, remove Wi-Fi till we hit 1 million users, right? So use or okay, they may say, instead ask for access when the user is in this screen, right? And not at the start. So this again saves a lot of stuff. So this is how you find out. You take a simple question, a very simple question of what the stakeholder has in their mind, break it down to what are the criteria for us to be able to say that, okay, this first time user experience is good. Then design your design your experiments to come up with objective results, no bias that you get into. Then you come up with answers to those, some of those questions, saying 96% success. We used a bot. There's a bot as an example. There's a bot in Apache. You can do an install and launch across X number of devices. So I say, hey, I tried doing this, and 96% was success and 4% was a failure, which is okay. Beta test of 80 people, and what's 80 out of 100 people stopped giving it the Wi-Fi permission. And then the stakeholder can make a decision about this. Now if they make a decision to remove the Wi-Fi access, there is a new question. That new question, the follow-up question is, does my app behave consistent to previous version even after Wi-Fi is removed? Now for this, my dear friends, my dear testers, my dear Moolyans, my dear whoever you are, the simple question, the simple answer to this is yes or no. It's not, oh, look at these 3 bugs. Now instead of trying to say yes or no, I say, well, in this device there is this issue. Yes, in that device there is that issue, but is it really going to impact me or not impact me? This is a clarity that the stakeholders want. Now, yes, a developer is interested at individual bugs, whereas the decision makers and the stakeholders are not interested at individual bugs, but they are interested at the story, at the summarized story of what's happening to their app. And that's where these questions and everything is actually coming into picture. Right now, let's come to the next question, right? So will the users recognize the value of this app? How would you test for this one? Okay, how would you test for this one? Will the users recognize the value of this app? So this is where we as testers need to ask product owners, business analysts, a lot of questions. And we have to ask, questions like, how do you recognize that the user has found the value, right? Okay, for example, how does WhatsApp know you are using the app? A is the session time, B is how many messages you are sending, and how often you are opening the app and how addicted you are opening to the app, right? So let's take an example of that, and then we'll say session time, right? Session time, or the session duration, it's all the same. Okay, session duration, number of sessions, And then what are the other ones in terms of, okay, active messages sent and received, right? So let's say these are the top, what's a metrics that they would be looking at. And now you can say, okay, here is my beta test of the 100 users, average session time per day was, okay, 3 minutes. And this increased to 5 minutes in a week. The number of, so this is, let's say, week 1, and let's say this is week 2. See, that is how long it takes sometimes to find answers to questions. We are, most of us are jumping, and we are all like hungry animals. We have not seen food for a long time. We just jump on it and just try to take it off, right? So if you look at some sensible animals, come near, sniff, and is it really something that I really want to have, and things like that, right? So week 1, week 2, and then you can say, okay, here is week 1. Messages sent was 100. Okay, received was about 200. Well, I'm continuously going, right? And then, oops, this is week 1. And then, okay, week 2, oops, week 2 sent has increased to about 400, okay, 200, and received is about, shucks, my keypad is about 400. So now people know that, okay, so looks like people are slowly getting addicted, to this app. Now, let's assume instead of this, you found out that, okay, at 100 it dropped to 20, from 200 it dropped to 40, and the same here, that it dropped to 1.5 minutes instead of 1.5 minutes instead of 3 minutes. Then that's a point for the stakeholders to think about. No, if you report when the stakeholder is dealing with this situation, if you are going and presenting to them some trivial issue, they're going to not bother about it, right? So that is one of the reason why we report 100 bugs, and how many of them really get fixed? Majority of them don't get fixed. I mean, this is the universal truth. Now, at one point, I wanted to ask a question to myself, and I tried to ask this question, saying that, hey, if people are going to just fix 3 bugs for every 100 bugs that I report, then why not I just find those 3 bugs, right? And that's the question that led me to find out what do stakeholders really want, and what are those fundamental questions that needs to be answered before anything else can be done, right? So that's how I try to work on it, and that's the reason why I believe there are a number of people here saying, hey, this is an approach that I want to use, this is an approach I want to use. Well, it's something interesting, right? They have been answering these questions without knowing they're answering these questions. And I think the more and more conscious that we get, the better it is for all of us. And we will be now more sharp and more focused, instead of trying to be vague, instead of trying to think that our job is to find bugs, and if we find good bugs, we are done. No. So if you look at it here, right, a lot of sub questions get answered. So when you profiled of who is the target base, and you said Samsung is 40%, Motorola is 30%, LG is 20%. You now have a clarity of test coverage. You now know, if I don't test on Samsung, I'm not testing for 40% of users, right? So that way, you will have beautiful clarity of what you're doing and how it's impacting, and what you're not doing and how it is also going to impact or not going to impact. And then you will be in a very credible position to answer a lot of questions. So one thing that I do when I am a tester, when I work as a tester, and sometimes I get pulled even these days. Is that I ask, I just listen to everybody. I just listen to everybody, and then I try to deduce what do they finally want to know from all of what I want to know, right? What do they want to know, right? And 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 now once they have this answer to these questions, then they want this answer to come in a repeatable fashion. That's where automation comes in. So the automation comes in, okay, so for example, uh, they say, okay, this is great. Now we will have a benchmark, right? So the benchmark, okay, can be 96% is the benchmark that we keep. Now we can automate where every version we will check off the bench. We'll check against benchmarking. Okay, let's say it's 96 again, right? Okay, 95.9, okay, 95.9, 94. People will still be okay. And let's assume suddenly from, let's say this is V1, this is V2, this is V3, this is V4, um, right? And suddenly V5 becomes 40%. This is a huge red flag. So this, they want to catch it really fast, and they want to say, hey, what broke in this build? There's some library which we forgot to include, and that's the reason why the number of what's the install and launch crashes have increased. So this they want to automate. So now, for even for you as a tester, whether you know automation, you don't know automation, you will have to get these things where it has to happen on a consistent basis into automation. Now, I know a lot of people who don't know to hands-on automate. They get worried about it, saying, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to me? Blah 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 about my job and all of that stuff." Hey, there's always somebody in the company who can do it. Your job is to get it done. Now, either you know to do it and you do it, which is good, or you know to get it done. That's great, right? So essentially, you will then be finding things that can be automated, and that's a huge value as well. And so that way, now you can say, look, uh, at at V1, right? Um, we were answering all your questions, and by V5, we have moved from answering your questions in a staggered way to a consistent way. And here is how the automation is going to help us, right? So when we answer these fundamental questions to stakeholders, they are now going to ask us interesting questions. They are now going to throw different challenges, at us. They're not going to ask us about, oh, do we have test cases for this? Do we have requirement traceability for this, and all of that stuff? See, so I would say, look at this answers all your questions. This is my requirement traceability. This is my test coverage. This is my structure. This is the simplicity in which I've understood everything. This is how I answer questions, right? So that's how I believe that we should be thinking it, and we can simplify our thinking. And uh, we it certainly becomes a responsibility of the testers to simplify their own thinking, because they're continuously bombarded with way too much information. And stakeholders love to keep talking with testers for whatever good reasons that they do. And of course, we also do appreciate that, but there's so much of talk that happens that we might end up clogging our head. It's again, I'm going to give example of the coronavirus situation. So many things we receive as a forward, nobody knows what's reality. Nobody knows what's true, right? So if we treat every information coming into our WhatsApp as truth, we should have committed suicide by now. Right? So that's how bad the kind of information that we are getting. But instead of that, we have to sort out, we have to sift out, uh, we have to uh, we have to investigate, we have to look at what are the credible sources, and then it becomes very, very simple. So that's what I've tried to do. And now any context that you are in, you will need to ask yourself, and you can come up with the three questions the stakeholders want to find answers for. Share it with them, let them correct it. For example, let's say I came up with these three questions and I shared it with them, and then they said, oh Pradeep, but security of the app is also important, the data consumption is also important. Then I would add it in an appropriate place, right? So let them change the questions. But when they change the questions and when they say these are the top three questions I have, you absolutely know that if you find answers to those questions, you are doing good. Okay, otherwise you will put in a lot of effort, you will keep your fingers crossed that the release goes well. And if the release goes well, then that's well and good. If the release goes bad, what happens to all your hard work? And now I am uh, I'm slowly becoming a strong advocate against hard work because I think that hard work only comes in when we don't know what work we are doing. And that's why there is a brute force method that we are trying to bang every nail with the little hammer that we have. Now 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 I think we need to come towards hitting only three nails that matters. So with that, I would like to stop here, pause here, and I would like to get your questions. I would like to answer if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any disagreement, anything that you want to talk about. I'm happy. You can ask them in the questions. You can ask them in the chat. You can raise hand. You can ask them in the chat,